When it comes to deploying BGP on the DLR and the Edge Services Gateway, it's actually pretty straightforward what you need to do. But I'm going to go ahead and take a couple minutes and whiteboard out what we need to have in place in order for this to work. Let me actually go ahead and bring this down a little bit so that I can pull up my pen tool and go through all this stuff. So let me go ahead and choose a color that everybody can see. So I'm going to go ahead, whoops. Nope, my pen tool decided to want to stop working. So no harm, no foul. Let me go ahead and, there we go. Alright, so let me go ahead and minimize the command prompt. And we're going to do a quick little bit of whiteboarding. So I went ahead and in between the OSPF video and this video, I went ahead and turned off OSPF. So I have my DLR. Whoops, that is way too skinny. I need to add a little bit of size to that. So I have my DLR, and then I have my Edge Services Gateway. And before I was running OSPF Area 0 here with my CSR 1000V. This was Area 0 on this link. And then from here down was Area 51 between these guys. So what I've done is I've actually taken all this away. So right now there is no OSPF running between these two. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a iBGP peering. iBGP meaning that the DLR is going to be in AS 65001 and the Edge Services Gateway will be in 65001, and I'm going to form a peering off this. What I'm going to do then is, and then over here this will be OSPF. And what I'll have to do is on the DLR, by the way, we had to turn OSPF off on the DLR. If it was running on there, you have to disable it in order for this solution to work. And what I'm going to do is I'll have a couple of logical switches associated here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to form an iBGP peering between these guys right here, and that'll come online. And then what I'm going to do from there is I'll have to do a BGP to OSPF redistribution mutually. So I'll have to take OSPF routes learned in from my backbone and bring those into BGP. I'll have to take BGP learned routes and then advertise them into OSPF. That is basically how that's going to happen. Down here, I'm going to have to make sure that for doing the redistribution of connected routes, I'll have to enable BGP on both of these connections in order for them to get advertised. That will allow everything from my backbone that's northbound here, and we'll say my core over here, to get propagated all the way down to here. So let's go ahead and actually put this into play and get it configured. So I'm going to start on my DLR and I'm going to work my way northbound. So I'm going to click on the DLR. I'm going to click on routing, and I am going to start by you're going to make sure the router ID is set. In this case here it is. I'm going to go to BGP. I'm going to come down here and click on edit, and I'm going to say the status is enabled and the AS is going to be 65001. Click on save, and then on my neighbors I'm going to add a peering to the interface. I'm going to use is the transit link. And the address here is going to be 172.29.11.1. My protocol address. What is the protocol address? The protocol address is going to be the IP address that you're going to point to from the Edge Services Gateway down to the DLR. I'm going to put in 172.29.11.254. I'm going to put in 65001. Now, when the communication between the DLR and the ESG comes online, I'm going to form a peering to 172.29.11.2 is where I'm going to learn routes from. I'm peering to 11.254, but I'm going to learn routes from 11.2, and you'll see that as we get a little further along. I'm going to click on add. I'm going to go ahead and publish that real quick. And once that's done, I'm going to go make sure to, on the DLR, that should be done here in just a second. Boom, go to route redistribution, and we have it turned on for OSPF. So I'm actually going to turn it off for OSPF, publish, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. I'm going to delete the OSPF redistribution, publish. current, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and click on BGP. We're going to enable for BGP, and I'm going to go ahead and add, and the learner protocol is going to be BGP, and I'm going to advertise connected routes. So, oh, you know what? It wasn't done doing its thing. Let me go ahead and close that out. And okay, so let's try that one more time. We're going to add, we go ahead and delete this one. Publish. There we go. So it's going to go ahead and push that config down. So it's removing the OSPF connected redistribution that's automatically set up. That'll take a moment for that to work. Okay, now it's done. Now I get to go add the redistribution statement. So the learner protocol is going to be BGP, and we're going to advertise the connected routes. Click on add and publish. So you have to be a little bit patient sometimes with this stuff. All right, now that I've got that done, I'm going to go back to up here. So I've got the DLR configured. I'm going to go to the ESG. Underneath the routing tab, I have OSPF is started. OSPF is peering up to the CSR 1000V. On BGP, I'm going to come down here. I am going to turn BGP on by clicking on the enable, and the local AS is going to be 65001. The default originate command is going to be there if we want to propagate a default route. For right now, I'm not going to do that. Click on save. I'm going to go ahead and publish. That'll take a couple seconds to push. And then I'm going to add a neighbor. The neighbor, I'm going to wait for this to finish pushing the update. There it goes. The neighbor I'm going to peer to is going to be right here. I'm going to push to 172.29.11.254 and then 65001. Just like that. I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to go ahead and publish that change. We're not doing a default information originate. Now, what I'm going to do is on the DLR, click in here, I'm going to do a show IPBGP neighbor, and you can see that I have an active peering. If you look right here, the local host is 172.29.11.254 if you to the right of my mouse. The remote is 172.29.11.1. On the ESG, if I do a show IPBGP neighbor, you're going to see that the remote host is going to be 172.29.11.254, and the local host is 172.29.11.1. So what's going to end up happening here is if I look on here and do a show IPBGP, notice that we are learning 172.29.1 and 2, but look at the next hop. The next hop is 172.29.11.2. So we're pointing on the ESG to the IP address of the protocol address that we defined on the DLR, but the updates are coming from 11.2, which is the interface IP. So now that I have that in play, I'm going to come back over here, and now I have to configure the redistribution. So what I have to do is I have to do a couple things. I have to enable OSPF redistribution, and I'm going to add the connectivity here. The first one is going to be the learner protocol will be OSPF, and then I'm going to advertise BGP into it. So the learner protocol is going to be OSPF, so the peering northbound, and BGP routes are going to be added to OSPF. Is basically how that's going to work. I'm going to click on add, and then I have to add another one. I'm going to turn BGP on. I'm going to add another table. This time the learner protocol is going to be BGP, and I'm going to redistribute OSPF. So I have to add that one. So we're going to have OSPF is going to be learning routes from BGP, and BGP is going to be learning routes from OSPF. I'm going to go ahead and click on publish. Give that a couple seconds to do its thing. And if I go down here to the DLR and I do a show IPBGP, we're going to learn a bunch of routes inbound. And that's basically what I want to have happen. So that got completed correctly. Come over here to the DLR or the Edge Services Gateway. I'm going to hit the up arrow, show IPBGP. I'm going to have a lot more coming in. So I'm going to be learning a lot more routes inbound. And if I go to my CSR, which is right here, if I come in here and do a show IP OSPF database, I should come down here and I'll see the 172.29.1 and 2 routes. If I do a show IP route, I should see 172.29 showing up in my routing table, which means if I was to do some connectivity testing from my VMs that are running on the hosts, I should have reachability to the internet. If I was to come over here to hosting clusters and click on LVM1 and go to the web console, you'll see that I have connectivity. So log into him real quick. And I'll hit the up arrow. I'll do a quick ping to Google. And that should work out. Actually, let me go back over here to my DLR. And I'm going to do a show IP route. And show IP BGP. I've learned a bunch of routes in the routing table. If I do a show IP route though, those routes aren't getting injected. Why are they not getting injected? That's weird. Connected? Is that why? Let me go back over here to let me go back over here to networking and security. Edges. On the ESG, if I do a show IP route, whoops. I'm learning a bunch of routes inbound. The DLR should be learning those routes in. Show IP BGP. I'm learning the routes in. I get a default gateway, a default route. That's weird. Let me go back over here and see why this isn't happening. DLR. Routing. Redistribution. Okay, I'm advertising my routes. I should be alerting the routes. The DLR should have the access. I'm actually a little surprised that it doesn't, because normally I do. Show IP route. I'm learning the route to the next top. Show IP BGP. They're coming in. Let me ping 172.29.1.11. Okay, I can ping that way. I think that might be a DLR issue. Let me do, on the DLR, let me do a clear IP route star. Let's do a show IP BGP. Show IP route. I'm actually kind of surprised that I'm not learning anything. Nothing's getting added to the routing table. So, I'm actually legit surprised. BGP. No routes to display. Show IP BGP neighbor. So I am, if I look in here, I am learning receive 30 prefixes and advertise 3. By summary, I am learning a bunch of prefixes inbound. I don't know if I'm able to, can I be specific to the neighbor? I can be. So in this case here, I'll use 172.29.11.1, and I will say routes that I've received. So I received a whole bunch of stuff. And if I do advertised routes, I've advertised these couple routes. So I'm actually surprised that I'm not learning anything. What are my options here? Let me go to enable. Enable. Go ahead and authenticate real quick. And let me do a clear IP BGP. That's counters. let me go ahead and clear the BGP neighbor and see if this will help. Do a show IP BGP. Okay, so now that I've learned them back in, which is what I want to have, let's do a show IP route. Okay, why am I not receiving them? So they're in my BGP table, they're not getting injected into my routing table, which is a little disconcerting. So I'm actually a bit surprised that it's not receiving them. Can I debug? Debug IP BGP, and let's go ahead and do another clear. Let's see why. There's no been. Okay. So I'm advertising that, and then I'm receiving routes. Now if I was to come in here and do a debug IP debug routing, this is what this should do. Is this should, if I clear the neighbor, it should tell me why things aren't getting injected in the routing table. And I'm not sure why that's not working. So what I could do is I can reboot it, because it is a software service. What I can cheat if I wanted to on the Edge Services Gateway, and I could come over to the ESG, or actually, yeah, on the ESG. Let me come over here to the ESG, and then the routing connection, I can go to BGP, and I can do, let's edit the default information originate. Go ahead and save that. It's going to publish it, and so as soon as it publishes it, this is technically already working. If we were to go back to the DLR, we are already running. At the very top here, we can see that we have a default route, so I know it's already coming through. So okay, now the default route is coming through. Okay, so now I'll be able to reach it, but it was really weird why I wasn't able to get all this. Now this is ideal. This is what you'd want to have on your DLR. You wouldn't want to have a ton of prefixes being propagated down. Oh, you know what? I bet you I know why. Let me come up to the Edge Services Gateway. So let's do a show IP BGP, and then do a show IP route. You'll notice that I have a lot of external type 2 routes. One of the things that, now I don't know if this is specific to VMware, but I know in Cisco, if you are learning a bunch of external routes via OSPF and you're redistributing them into BGP, BGP won't by default redistribute those routes into BGP. So what I can do, or what you could do, is use a different autonomous system number between the ESG and the DLR. That should work. The redistribution, if we were to go OSP or BGP from OSPF, if we were to come in here and edit this, we could, now it's saying any, we could, well, in this case here, it's, I don't think this is the problem. Now, we should have reachability now. If I do the ping again, because we have a default route in the routing table, which is what you would want to have anyway. So yeah, it's working now because there's a default route from BGP being propagated. So because of the fact that we're learning a default route through BGP, this is working. Or you can just configure a static route to point to the Edge Services Gateway. That would work as well. But we're obviously trying to focus on BGP routing here. So it's working the way that we're trying to get it to operate. But it's one of those things where the ESG has the route. If we look here, we can do a show IP route. We can see we're bringing in the route via OSPF right here. So it's a default route being brought in via OSPF. But if we look at the show IP BGP neighbors, and we point towards, we'll look at the IP address of 172.29.11.254, and we look at advertised routes, we'll see that we're advertising it, right? The default route is being advertised right here. So theoretically speaking, it should have propagated it down to the DLR. The DLR is receiving it. If we go back up to show IP BGP, we are receiving it, right? But because of the fact that the DLR is having some sort of weird issue, I'm not exactly sure why, but doing a default information originate is going to be what we need to have in order for the routes to propagate, for the default route to be down there anyway. So that is that for this deployment. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me and stopping by, and I'll catch all of you in the next video.